I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello, everyone. I'm speaking with Steve in Kansas this evening. Steve, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Well, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Before we started recording, you mentioned that you were going to start with some experiences in Washington State. So we'll just go ahead and I'll give the mic to you, and you can take me through what all you've experienced.
It sounds good. I was born and raised in Washington State, primarily in Lewis County, Thurston County. I lived in Thurston County. I 18. I went to work in the woods, and I was pretty much a logger out there until May of 1980, and I lived in the woods, and you might say it was probably in the 1960s I was introduced to Bigfoot. My dad got interested in it. There was a hoaxer down in Toledo, Washington, that had a gift shop, and he was saying he had spotted Bigfoot and had some tracks, and come to find out he'd made them out of plywood.
That was Ray Wallace,
and,
right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I saw some of his stuff displayed down there.
But that upset me a little bit. But my dad had a book that he read, and it was about the miners at St. Helens that got attacked. And that sparked an interest in me a little bit. And but I always thought they was up in the hills, the mountains. And I think it was in November 1970, my brother-in-law got me interested in the hunting over in Yakima County, just south of Rimrock Lake, up on Pine Grass Ridge and Bear Mountain. And I know the year prior to that, we was hunting pine grass, and we had to camp down on Teton River there. And at 10 o'clock at night, I heard I thought it was a wolf that howled. It howled 3 times, and I was shaking my head. I mean, it literally put the hair up on the back of my neck. And at that time, I didn't think we had timber wolves, and I didn't think we had wolves in Washington. I knew it wasn't a coyote. Well, anyway, that morning I headed right up over the ridge. I'd never seen any tracks or anything, but the following year, we decided that we was going to hunt Bear Mountain. And I got up there the day before elk season opened up. And I sent a 9-man tent up. And I got up there about 2:30 in the afternoon. And my brother and brother-in-law were supposed to show up later on that afternoon. And it got dark. I'd picked something to eat inside the tent and filled my thermos up with coffee. And I kept hearing something walking behind the tent, about 20, 30 feet behind the tent. And I knew it wasn't a raccoon. I ruled out a bear. And I got ready, and I remember crawling. Nobody had showed up. And, it's dark out there, but anyway, I decided, well, I'm going to go to sleep. And I crawled inside the sleeping bag, and those footsteps kept going back and forth, back and forth. And I got there, and I says, nah, I'm going to get in the car. And I did. I grabbed my gun and went and sat in the front seat of the car, locked the car up, and I dozed off. And about 12 o'clock, they showed up. And I told them what had happened, and they was about half scared to spend the night there in the tent. But we did, and got up the next morning and got a bite to eat. And at daybreak, I took off to the southeast. My brother went south. My brother-in-law went north, and we went out and hunted. And about I'm going to say 12 o'clock, I met my brother south at camp on the main ridge up there on Bear Mountain, and we hadn't seen anything, but we was walking back to camp, and we seen these elk tracks, and they headed off over into this box canyon. I mean, there's a solid rock wall on the east side that's about 100 foot tall, one on the north side and one on the west side. And it was a good-sized canyon, and those elk had barreled off down in there. I said, let's go in there after them. I said, they don't have any place to go. And my brother, I believe, is 3 or 4 years older than me, and he'd just gotten out of the Navy, and he basically taught me how to hunt. And we'd take 4 steps, stop, look, listen. I remember I met him at 12 o'clock. At 1:30, we was almost down to the bottom of the canyon, and we cut some fresh elk sign, and it really looked promising. And I had my hopes up. And at that moment, I got there, and I says, do you feel what I feel? And he said, yeah. He said, let's get the hell out of here. He's carrying 30-06. I got a 7mm Remington Magnum. At that particular moment, the guns didn't mean anything to us. And I turned around, and 45 minutes later, we was on top of the ridge. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. We didn't run. It was all uphill. Well, we walk into camp, and my brother-in-law's there. And he was saying, hey, he said, I was just talking to some elk hunters down the road here this morning, and he said there was bear hunters up here last weekend camped, and he said Sasquatch about 9 foot tall with red eyes showed up. And he said those boys packed up and left. Well, needless to say, we did the same thing. I don't know what was in that canyon, but when my brother, the tone of voice, said, let's get the hell out of here, I knew he was serious. And then when I learned that the bear hunters had been run out of there by Sasquatch, well, that was enough for me. However, I did go back in 2005, and I did get an elk, but I stayed down on the west side on the river. No more high mountains, but I pretty much spent my life out there in the woods. I started out as a choker setter, worked my way up to fallen timber, and in 78 I had a accident and pretty much put the ends to my fallen, but I did go to work for St. Regis up around up at Mineral, and I got to know those mountains pretty good there, and then we transferred to Tacoma, but in May of 1980, I after a bad divorce, it was suggested that I leave state, so I came back here in Kansas, and Bigfoot really didn't register. I bow hunted back here for 30 years. I've been back here a total of 38 years now, and I came back here. I was, after living in Washington, being around black bears, I had 7 encounters with black bears. I don't know what it is with being black bears, but I don't have to hunt them. They just automatically come to me.
They just find you.
I had to. They do. The first one, I was about 16 years old, and I had one come charging down over on top of me, and it was about 8 feet away. And I stood up. I had my 30-30, and I didn't even have time to get it to my shoulder, and it hit at the bottom of that ravine. And man, it seen me and it shot off. Well, then, when I was working up at St. Regis, I got hurt in a logging accident, and they had me flagging the logging trucks up there. And I sat on this log on a corner for 3 days. And the second day, I took my pocket knife out, and I had this piece of wood, and I was carving a totem pole flute. And the bushlers were up on the hill, and they fired their saws up that morning, and the first tree that came down is cinnamon bear comes running down off the hillside. And I watch it jumping from log to log, and it's coming down towards me, and I didn't think too much about it. And all of a sudden it gets to the top of the bank right across the road from me, and I look at it, and I start getting a little concerned. I got a totem pole in one hand about 16 inches long and a pocket knife in my right hand. And there's this bear. She comes down off the hill, hits the ditch, comes running directly at me. And at that moment, I just stood up, and she seen me and went running across on the other side. But
wow.
And then I've seen two cougars out in Washington. I had one jump across the railroad grade in front of me about 20 feet. And it came through the salal, and it was totally quiet. And it didn't bother me. And then I moved back to Kansas, and I was bowman, and I wasn't scared of nothing until one evening during the rut. I irritated a 8-point buck, and I got between him and the doe.
Uh-oh.
And he literally charged me. I was walking on this old road. I was going to go in there and stand in the stand, and I heard this hooves hitting the ground, and I said, what the hell is a horse up here doing? And I look up, and there's this buck with his head down, and he's coming at me on a dead run. And I get there, and I had a compound bow, and I just threw it down in front of me, and I held onto it with both hands. And I said, well, you're going to hit the bow before you hit my chest. He came within 4 feet of me. Ran up on the hill about 20 yards, and stood there and looked at me broadside.
Good
and I
Lord.
was standing there. I was shaking. And he kind of twisted his tail and took off. And needless to say, I went back in 2 days later and got him. But
that's something
something
a lot of people don't understand, that there's a lot of game in Kansas.
Oh, I hunted back here for 30 years, and I ended up bow hunting, and I never seen another hunter. And I always got my deer every year. I never had a problem. And but after that, I learned that I didn't like to be out in the timber that much at dark. I mean, it's you just, I don't know. It's that deer incident really put a little bit of fear in me. But in 1995, I lived in Westmoreland, and then we moved over to Holton. And it was from Potawatomi County, we moved into Jackson County. And I started working at for Oldham's sausage company. And I ran across the gal, and she said that she was from Valley Falls, just west of me now. But she said that her mom had seen a bear. And I got there and I was, wow, there's no bears in Kansas. And put that back in my subconscious mind. And then it wasn't until 2007 I moved from Holton, and I moved down here on the farm just I'm a mile and a half out in the country from in Mayetta, and I'm a mile and a half east of the Potawatomi Indian Reservation. But I think it was 2007 when we moved down here, and I got hurt at work and got disabled, and I had a Native American friend, and he taught me how to make Native American flutes. And that turned into be a hobby and therapy, and later on a social life. But I was making the flutes and stuff, and it was about 2012. A guy gave me a cedar chair made out of 2x2s that folded up, and I had a back injury. Man, this chair was comfortable, so I started making them and selling them. Well, I ran across the guy about 12 miles from me in Larkenburg that had a lumber yard, hardware store, and he raised cattle. And I learned that I could buy old growth cedar through him, and he had a lot of 2x8s, 2x6s, 2x12s. And a lot of them was 20 foot long, and I could get them at a good price through him. And we got in there and we got talking. And there's Lake Nebo there, just it'd be west of Larkenburg a little ways, and he owns all the property in there. He's in the cattle business, a very successful businessman. And we got talking there one day, and he said, he says, I was in here with the doc. I'm not going to mention the doc's name because he's currently working in Holton, but he said, my son was there, and he said, we was back in there horseback riding, and he said, we seen a Bigfoot. And I didn't know how to take it. And then I got thinking about Darla, and she told me that her mom had seen a bear in Valley Falls. And this ain't but maybe 10 to 15 miles distance, or maybe it could have been in the same area. And I got to, Well, I didn't think, it didn't really sink in. And at that particular time, I was bowhunting out there at Lake Nebo. And it was public hunting, and I didn't think too much about it. And then I was trying to think. It was about that same time I was going behind the house here. The house sits on 80 acres, and I rent. But I had permission to go back there, and I would cut these small cedar saplings and make walking sticks, and I would get flute material and stuff back there. And I was on the back 80, and I come walking through, and I ran across this pile of scant, and I knew it had to be it was August or September, because the poke berries were ripe, and they're a berry that grows on a bush, and it looks like a clump of grapes, and they're purple, but they're poisonous to humans. And I found this pile of scant that was about 2 inches in diameter and about a foot long. And I looked at it, and I scratched my head, and it says, ain't no raccoon, ain't no dog, cows don't eat pokeberries. And the thought crossed my mind, it's got to be a Bigfoot. But it didn't sink in. And it was on that same ridge. I've hunted back here for 30 years. I covered quite a bit of territory. And I've on that same ridge, just down over the hillside, there was this sapling, and up about I'm going to say 7 to 8 feet. It was literally twisted and bent over. And the bark had separated from the wood. And I got there and I scratched my head again. I don't know, I looked at it and I said, now, that's something a tornado would do. But why would it do it in this clearing and only hit this one tree?
Mm-hmm.
And that I get thinking about it, and I can remember being out there bow hunting and seeing these trees the same way, but I was ignorant of the fact that Bigfoot still hadn't sunk in.
Mm-hmm.
And about a year ago, I got interested in Bigfoot. And I got on YouTube, and I don't know how many thousands of eyewitness reports I listened to, and I started putting two and two together. Well, my flutes, I make and sell Native American flutes through chairs, and I started making drums, and I go to these shows, and we've got this big show up in Sparks, Kansas. It's antique show, kind of flea market, and there's about 450 vendors. I'm up there for 5 days, and I made a 16-foot teepee I stay in, and I had my tables out. Just for kicks and giggles, I make a little whistle that sounds like a whippoorwill, and I call it my groundhog whistle. I was over at Leavenworth several years ago, and I had one, and I was blowing it, and there was a groundhog where I was set up at. There was a drainage creek in town there, and there was a groundhog burrow, and that day I called the groundhog out of the burrow 7 times. He would respond to the whistle. So I just nicknamed it a groundhog whistle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I got thinking, well, it worked. And I mean, I would sell them as groundhog whistles, and my sales really went up because these farmers back here hate groundhogs. But anyway, I was there, and I was joking around, and this family from Valley Falls shows up. And I get talking to the mother, and I told her I was spiritual and stuff. She said, well, I am too. And then she brought her daughter over, and her daughter's up in her 30s now. But anyway, I was telling her about, I got a groundhog whistle here too. And I mentioned, well, groundhog or Bigfoot. And she got there and she says, have you seen a Bigfoot? And I said, no, but I shared my experiences out in Washington State. And she said, I seen 2 of them. And she says they was on all 4s, and they got up. And she says, it bothers me to this day. And she showed me her arms, and she literally had goosebumps. And I got there, and her mom got there and says, yeah, we see him. Well, after getting to know the family a little bit better, she ended up buying several flutes, and she's got a drumming circle, and I keep her supplied in her drums. She currently lives in Wichita. But I got talking to her brother, and he said, I seen him. And then I talked to the daughter-in-law one day. Their dad owns a shop over there, and he works on motorcycles and cars. Very good mechanic. And I got talking to the daughter-in-law, and she said, yeah, she says the whole family's seen him. They don't talk about him. I talked to the mother. I talked to Jill about it.
Mm-hmm.
And Angie, and they get there and they said, they're out there, we leave them alone, and they leave us alone. And that's just the way it is. They don't go out looking for them, but they know they're out there.
Let me ask you, what's the area like around there?
Well, It's let's say I'm 45 minutes away from the Missouri River. We have the Delaware River that runs through there. It's rural America, a lot of farms. The farms are scattered out. There's creeks that run through the areas. There's a lot of timber here. It's rolling hills.
Okay.
And there's a lot of cover. But after doing this show, I was in Mayetta, and there's a antique shop, and the guy is Native American that runs it, and I get in there, and I get talking to him about Bigfoot. And this now, where these family that's seen the Bigfoot, that's in Jefferson County. I'm in Jackson County, but they're about 10 miles east of me. Well, I get in there and I get talking to this guy about Bigfoot, and he said there was a guy in here that lives on 160th Road, which is right at the end of 158th that I live on, 5 miles east of me. And he said he was in here, and he said he was looking out his window, and he said this 10-foot black man, hairy man, was in his farm pond catching fish. And he went nuts. I mean, he would come down to the post office. He'd come into town once a week and get his mail. And he was giving a weekly update. He called the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. He called Pratt, the headquarters for Kansas Fish and Game. He called them and reported it. He called K-State and talked to some professor there about it. He called KU, and then he ended up calling KBI, Kansas Bureau of Investigations. I mean, he was shook up. But come to find out, there was staying on his farm, and he was observing them. And he has a brother, and he was in the military. And this guy is a retired railroad worker, and from my understanding, acres. The woman that owned it, that he bought it from, raised goats. Now, this area where he lives on 160th is not that far away from where these people had this sighting in Jefferson County. In fact, this guy is right on the county line. He's in Jackson County, and they're just across the highway on a farm. And, I mean, it's in the same vicinity. And anyway, this guy, I would go down. I'd go into Mayetta, and I would check with the postmaster. And I asked her, I says, is the guy insane? And she said, yeah, he's all right. But anyway, getting back to this guy's brother that lives out in California, he's in the military. And his brother sent him this special camera, and he got it in the mail. And he said, yeah, he says, I'm going to get some photos of him. He said, my brother sent me this camera, and when I get the photos, I'm supposed to send it back to him. Well, the postmaster had asked him, you take any photos? And he got there, and he says, I don't know. He says, I haven't taken any yet. And the guy that ran the antique store asked him. He said, no, he says, I don't know how they'll respond. But he said, they come up, and he said, they knock on the window. And he said, they want me to come outside, but he said, I won't go outside when they're there. And, I continued to go down in the town once a week and get an update. I could never catch him. I'd seen him one day, but he didn't elaborate on it. He wouldn't talk about it. And I told the guy that running the antique store I was listening to the Cryptic Brothers down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They do research on the Bigfoot and stuff. And I got their phone number, and I said, well, because this guy, there was critters out there. I think he referred to them as forest people or something. He didn't really know what it was, but there was a group of them out there, and he said one day 2 groups showed up. There was 2 bunches of them, and they started to abuse a juvenile, and he got upset. And he called the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and said, they're abusing this juvenile out here. And I don't know what happened. But by this time, the postmaster in town, she's starting to shake her head and roll her eyes. And the last, this is getting into November, and I walked in and got a book of stamps, and I said, well, have you heard anything from the guy up here on the farm with the Bigfoot? She said, yeah. She said he was in the other day and said that they're wearing clothes. And I kind of smiled at her. And she says, yeah, she says, I guess they broke into somebody's house and stole clothes, but they're wearing clothes now. And I said, well, it's possible. I said, I've heard of reports of them having blankets and stuff. I said, I guess anything is possible. And after that, he kind of went quiet, but this guy that owned the antique store, not getting back to that, I gave him the number of the Cryptid Brothers, and this guy, I mean, he didn't know where to turn to, and this was, I'm going to say, about November, and I got the phone number to him, and he said he took it, but he said he quit talking. He said he won't mention anything about it, and I went into the post office and I asked her, and she says, yeah, she said, he said they left. Well, that would have been August, September, October, November. That's about 3 months, and they probably depleted their food supply and moved on, possibly. I don't know. But now, this time I'd started doing more research, and I found out just west of me, over on the Potawatomi Reservation on the internet, BFRO, had 2 incidences. I think one dates back to 1965, where one was seen. And the guy drives off the highway and hits a clothesline.
Uh-oh.
One right across the road in front of me. Well, then, not too long ago, there was a gal working at the casino, and she got off shift at night, and she started driving down O Road south of the casino, and she was on the phone to her sister. She was going to her sister's house, and one ran out in front of the road in front of her, and she hit it with a car. And it broke her plastic bumper and stuff. And she reported that to BFRO, and that's where I read the report out. Well, then I got going through there, and I read a report as to where there's, I think it was just last year in Jackson County, there was a dogman sighting. And the history teacher, the girl either had to be going to Holton or Hoyt, and because the history teacher said, well, your home is sitting on by a Native American burial ground, an old one, and they kind of linked the dogman to that, but I didn't like to hear that. I really don't know about the dogman. I guess they exist, but getting Bigfoot through my system is enough.
Yeah, that's enough, right?
Yeah, but what I've learned is when I'm out, I do shows in Missouri. I used to do them in Nebraska. Now I'm just south of the Nebraska line. But when I seen your podcast on the kid that ran across the ones just south of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Right.
Well, I do 2 shows up there just south of the line in Kansas, and I got there and I says, wow, I've been in that area. And the Blue River comes down through there, but I know that area, and it doesn't surprise me a bit. Here again, it's rural America, no big towns or big cities, a lot of farms.
Right.
They've got corn. They've got the corn. They've got an abundance of deer, and I don't know if they eat soybeans or not, but I mean they've got turkey. They have a food abundance. But getting back to Angie, the one that's seen those 2, and this would have been back in 1990. She still gets goosebumps to this day, and we text every morning back and forth. We become pretty close friends. And I asked her, I says, can you tell me what type of heads did they have on them? And she said they were round. She says it was a distance. She said I only seen them for a short amount of time. But it's what they did to her. And me finding that pile of scamp behind the house, I know there's no animals in Kansas that can do it.
Right.
But wherever I go out, when I'm doing my shows, I will mention Bigfoot. I go into town, I go into Walmart, I'll run across somebody. I mentioned Bigfoot, and I did this 3 weeks ago. I ran across this gal that only lives 2.5 miles west of me on a res. And I mentioned Bigfoot, and she says, I hit one a year ago. And I said, what? She says, yeah, I have the paper route. And I'm out there, and she was on P Road, a mile south of where the gal hit the one on O Road. Now, the road is 134th, and you got O and P that run north and south. Well, on 134th south, there's a section of land, because everything is back here is pretty much divided up into 1 mile sections. And the Native Americans have an area out there that's called No Man's Land, and it's south of 134th. And I heard of one story several years ago. A native went out there, and a lot of times, I mean, they're not all Potawatomi Indians out there, because they come in from other reservations and work out there. And this native went into No Man's Land, and it's got a nice creek that runs through it that flows year-round, and it's heavily wooded. And he went in to pick pawpaws, and I didn't know what pawpaws were until just here recently. But they're sort of like a kiwi, and they grow on a tree probably 12, 15 feet high, maybe 20 foot high, and in August they get ripe, and they're pretty rich. And I was going to go back behind my house this summer and look for them, and it was hot, and then thought of Bigfoot. And 3 years ago I had 2 major strokes, and I don't get around too good, and I decided not to. But anyway, he went down in there and he got his pawpaws, and he left his pawpaws in there. I don't know what the hell he's seen. He won't say what he's seen.
Something spooked him.
He will not. Something spooked him. Yeah, but all the elders say don't go in there, and nobody goes down in that area during the night. Well, this gal was out here delivering papers, And I talked to her last week. She's running the cashier. And I said, well, I'm going to have an interview. I said, would you like to speak up about it or anything? She said, no, I don't want nothing to do about it. She said, the only thing I can tell you is I don't know what I hit. She said it was black. It moved fast. It had hair 4 inches long. And she says it stunk just like that other. The gal that it hit the one a mile north of her said that one had put out an odor that was, she didn't say what it smelled like, but she says it stunk. And she says, I don't know what it was. And she said, I didn't call anybody. She says, what are you going to tell them?
Right.
What you hit?
Right.
She says, and she just had liability. It tore the passenger's mirror off on her car. But she still delivers papers out there, but she says, I refuse to drive the south side of that road.
Wow.
But I drove down there, and I drove the area, and I said, yeah, there's fields here. There's a creek that flows through. It's a dense forest. There's some nice trees in there. I mean, back here, an oak tree, 3 foot. Some of the sycamores are 4 foot. I mean, they're fairly old forests, but nobody goes in there. And I drove around the section, and then the same day I drove up east. Up to that guy's farm, and one's a low maintenance road, and I went up there and I was snooping around that night. And I've heard where these researchers go out and they harass these Bigfoot, and Bigfoot shows up at their house. Well, I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but where I live at is I got a neighbor a quarter of a mile on the east of me and a quarter of a mile on the west of me, and I can't see him. I'm down in the ravine. And I've got a ravine that runs, a creek that runs behind the house, and you can walk up that ravine and you can be standing 20 feet from the house and I'm not going to know it. I mean, you can sneak right up and look in my living room window. But what I noticed is after I went out and I was messing around those areas, I got back in here, and I don't watch a TV anymore. I don't watch the propaganda news. So anyway, I'm sitting here, and it's pretty quiet, and I hear this owl outside my window. And it's not really a hoot. It's kind of a coo.
Mm-hmm.
And it was soft. And I got there, and I says, now, do I grab my flashlight and go out there and see if it's an owl? And it was cold out, and it was late, and I took the option of going to bed. I sleep a loaded 12 gauge, and it's right next to me. But the way I look at it, I'm disabled. I've had 2 major strokes. I'm quarter Norwegian. I don't give up. And you tell me I can't do something, and I'm gonna show you different.
I know that.
Therapist.
I know that. My family's from Norway.
Yeah, my grandfather came. We are stubborn.
That's right.
And well, there was. I remember Bucota there. They had a. My dad was at an Eagles picnic there, and they had a grease pole. And there was a guy that was saying, well, $20 for anybody that can make it to the top. And my dad was there, and he said, if Steve was here, he said, Steve would get to the top. And I show up about an hour later, and they come running out, and they says, you got to climb this pole. I was going to float down the Skookumchuck River on inner tubes, and that was the only reason I went over there. And he says, you got to climb this pole. You got to climb this pole. And at that moment, I turned into a cat.
Yeah.
And I think I broke every fingernail, but I made it to the top. But I just learned that you don't tell us that we can't do something because we're going to do it.
That's
But
true.
I still, on occasion, the landlord, he sold this 80 acres, and I got, there's a new guy that owns the property, but he's younger, and he gave me permission to go back there. Well, in the spring, there's the creek, and I walk about 3/4 of the mile to the creek, and I know where all the morel mushrooms are. And I haven't told him I know where they're at, but I still go back there, and I walk the creek, and I get my mushrooms. But I know I'm not going to go out and go chasing them. I'm not going to go out there. I mean, when I go, one of the reasons I bow hunted for 30 years is I like to go in the woods, and I don't want nobody to know I'm in there. I want to be quiet. I want to go in, and I want to come out undetected. And I'm pretty much the same way when I go out. Anytime I go out, I just like to slip in and slip out. But I realize at my age and being disabled that I'm a good candidate for a Happy Meal. And, and I use common sense. And I really need somebody to go with me, but in all the years I hunted, I was always successful being alone. But what I know now after researching, I'm a little bit more skeptical about going into some of these areas. And
yeah, you definitely
I am taking my phone. Yeah, and what I've done about a month ago, I ran up to Jackson County to the courthouse, and I went in and I asked him for a map. I wanted to buy a map of Jackson County. And she had the ones with all the owners and stuff on it. And I says, you may think I'm crazy, but I said, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I said, we have Bigfoot in Jackson County. And I said, I want to get a map and put it on the wall, and I want to put these pins on it. And I want to keep track of where these people are seeing the Bigfoot at and what time of year. And I want to kind of try to establish a pattern with them if I can.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's why when I go out, if it's at Walmart or a hardware store, I'll mention Bigfoot to people to see what a reaction I get. Sometimes I get laughed at.
Oh, sure.
I do. I mean, sometimes I get laughed at. I really feel sorry for this one guy this one gal that works at Walmart, and she lives right in the vicinity of where all these Bigfoot are being seen. She's single, and she lives out in the country alone. And at the time, I didn't know that she was single. And I says, just a heads up, over there in the area you live in, I said, Bigfoot has been sighted. And I said, it's pretty much confirmed. I said, the sources, the eyewitnesses I've talked to and stuff, I said, it's a very reliable source. And I said, I wouldn't let your kids out at night. I said, get them inside. And I said, I'd be careful about being outside in the country at night. And she says, well, I don't have any kids in Bigfoot. And she kind of laughed. And at that moment, I guess I said a prayer for her, because those are the people that are going to see them firsthand, and they're not going to know how to respond. But I guess what I feel kind of a responsibility of mine is to let people be aware that we're not alone out there.
Sure.
I went up to Mayetta today, and I went into the antique shop, and I wanted to see if I could catch this guy that come in to get his mail on Saturday. I wanted to talk to him. I understood his brother came out from California and spent Christmas with him and is staying with him, I think. I don't think he's gone back, but I wanted to see him, and Eldon told me no. He said he came in Friday and got his mail. He said he won't talk about Bigfoot anymore. He said he just buttoned up, and I'm getting there, and I'm thinking, well, did the men in black pay him a visit because he was raised in such a ruckus? But he went silent on it. But I wanted to. I know where the guy lives, but the property is posted. He has a steel gate across his driveway.
Oh.
It says no trespassing. I'm not going to go driving in there and say, "Hey, I'm your neighbor down the road." You don't do that. If they've
No.
got if they've got the property posted and no trespassing. Now, if I can catch him uptown, he's fair game. I'm going to question him.
Right.
But until then, I do want to do some more. I need to do more investigating. I'm not going to go out chasing them. Where I live, I mean, here they are 5 miles east of me and approximately 4 to 5 miles west of me. I'm right in between them. Right behind the house, I have a 17-acre watershed pond that is stocked with fish. I mean, there's bass, and there's state record bass in there. There's channel cat. They put walleye in there. They had a crappie fishing tournament on it here several years ago. But after listening to this guy and realizing that they do go into these farm ponds and they do get fish. Now, I did learn from this guy that lives east of me. In August, they was catching fish. And he said they're getting deer. September, he said, they're killing deer now. They're eating deer now. And then another comment he made that threw me for a loop. He said they bury their dead in the trees. He said, I seen them. He said they put their dead in the trees.
That's interesting.
And, well, it is. But you get thinking back to some of the Native Americans.
Sure,
and
they did that.
They did that. They'd put them on scaffolds.
Right.
They'd put them up off the ground. And I got there and I said, well, is this, this, you start linking the Native Americans with Bigfoot. And then he mentioned the fact that Grandma babysits. He said Grandma looks after the young ones, and the big ones will leave. But he said Grandma stays there, and she says she takes care of the juveniles. But the last I heard, after he said that they was wearing clothes, the last time I checked with the postmaster, she said, he told me, he said they left. Well, I seen the postmaster here about 3 weeks ago. I was at a flea market, and she came over to get, she was on lunch break. And I was asking her about him, and she says, I won't even talk to him anymore if he mentions Bigfoot. She says, I just ignore him. And I'm sitting there saying, wow, that poor guy. I mean, this guy was using her to get this stuff off his chest, and she just totally turned him off. And I haven't seen her since then, but I do want to meet this guy. I don't want to go up there and snoop around very much. I have a feeling I'm not going to have to go out there and go tromping through the brush. I make flutes and I make drums. I don't play the flute. I have the gift to make them. But you're not going to catch me being a flute player. going out behind the house, playing the flute, beating the drums. In fact, I won't even do it. I've lived out here 12 years now, and I have barn cats.
Mm-hmm.
They're wild. I got them from a friend, and they was wild when I got them, and I turned them loose. I feed them once a day and give them water, and one of them I could pet, but I could get up to 30 cats a year, and then I'd have to thin them out. But here recently, I can't keep cats. The first weekend in October, I went over to Lathrop, Missouri, and I was gone 3 days, and I ran across the gal that says, "Yeah, I got a neighbor that's seen a Bigfoot over there." And I'm getting hey, this is good. And then I had the opportunity to go up into a state park one evening. Some friends took me up through there, and the deer were out there eating, and all I could do was I had my eyes peeled on Bigfoot because it was in the area. I mean, it was just perfect habitat for him. But anyway, I got back from Lathrop, Missouri, and I was short 9 cats.
Wow.
But I lose on the average of 20 cats a year, and they disappear. I don't find them. Somebody said, "Well, the coyotes are getting them." Well, my neighbor, he's in his 30s. He's got coyote hounds, and he turns those hounds. You never know when they're going to end up down here in the yard. He told me, he said, "Well, they come down here." He said, "You shoot them with a shotgun." He said, "I don't want them down here."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not going to do it. It's not the dog's fault.
Sure.
I'll yell at them, and they normally leave. But, you know, if you know people who raise hounds, they feed them enough they normally feed them a high protein feed, but they keep them on the lean side so they can run.
Right.
And they're always down here, and if they can get cat food, they're going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of watch them on that, but they're not getting the cats. I don't find any signs of the cats. In the years past, I had 27 Musgrave ducks. Every one of them within a year was gone. I
Wow.
had 2 geese. And I think the foxes got some of them. But the things that get me is I can go walking out around in the timber, and I don't find any remains.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we got cougar back here in Kansas. I seen one. I watched it stalk doe out in the bean field,
Mm-hmm.
and a car drove in. It was the last day of bow season, and I did jump, and it went through the patch of timber, and I had to go through that patch of timber to get to my boat to go across the lake. And it was dark. I had a self-climbing tree stand on, and I got there, and I said, "Oh, shit." And I took off. I made it through the timber. I got to the hay meadow, and everything was good. And I had a patch of timber about 100 feet I had to walk through to get to the boat, and I had a fence about 3 foot high. Well, I got in about 50 foot, and I jumped something, and my heart was up in my throat. And I got there, and I said, "Oh, it's a deer." Well, it made 3 leaps, and it turned around and started coming back towards me. And at that moment, that flight mode kicked in. I grabbed an arrow out of my quiver, and I put it in my right hand. And I don't remember going over the fence. I threw everything in the boat, untied it, and I got out in the lake. And that was the last time I hunted that area at night. But
Wow.
I'm pretty sure it was the cat that I jumped it, and it came back.
More than likely.
Because deer don't do that.
Listen, Steve, we're just about out of time. I'm going to have you back. You have some very interesting information, and I'm going to put you in touch with Sean in Nebraska too.
Okay, great. I've heard some stories about the Omaha Indian Reservation. They have them up there. It's just north of Omaha. but I'm learning they're in Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas.
Everywhere. As a matter of fact, Sean said
They're everywhere.
Sean said he's going to call you tomorrow.
Okay, I'll be home. I'm retired, and I don't have anything better to do. I'm going to continue to investigate, and I mean, I don't care if people laugh at me. I believe in Bigfoot. I just feel sorry for him. I really don't want to have an encounter, but I think sitting here on the farm, I don't think I'm going to have to go to him. I don't know.
I'm going to send you some pictures of some other sign to watch for also.
Okay.
And then I'd like to keep in touch with you too.
Yeah, I'm interested in this. I'm going to run over into Pottawatomie County here pretty soon. I got an area over there. I get cedar, and I'm gonna watch for tree breaks. Now, the tree breaks got my attention as far as the teepees and stuff. I was ignorant of the fact. It could have been out there, and I didn't pay any attention to it. I'm not one of those type of guys. And but I mean, the tree breaks did get my attention, and I have seen them back here. But
right. Okay. Well, listen, we're out of time, but I'm gonna send you some information. So we'll keep in touch, and I certainly appreciate you doing the interview.
Well, I just feel people need to know that we're not alone out here.
I agree.
I mean, that one guy I was talking to today, he said they've been here forever.
Right.
And they have been.
Mm-hmm.
And the natives out here know it.
Oh yeah, they do.
But and it's the type I have back here. I want to call them the ancient ones. They're not aggressive. Everybody I've talked to said, you leave them alone, they're going to leave you alone. Mm-hmm. And all they want to do is they want to be left alone. And I haven't heard of any aggressive reactions from them. Nobody being harassed, other than the fact they like to run out in front of cars.
Right. Okay,
you
Steve.
know, but
we're gonna get cut off in a moment, so we'll have to wrap it up. But
okay, we will talk to you later.
Okay, we'll talk again real soon. Okay.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, Steve. Thank you so much.
Have a beautiful evening.
You too, my friend.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.